The main difference between validation and what's written in the IFU is we're validating what's actually written in the IFU. What we take from the IFU is we challenge the processing steps, right? So we have point of use cleaning, validations. We don't use point of use cleaning because we are cautioning into error where, what if they forgot? What if they were in a hurry? They have to change the room in 20 minutes. So they just throw it in the bucket and put it out with no absorbent towels or even a foam, and it's outside.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line, where infection stops and information starts. You're listening to a special combined season of First Case and Transmission Control podcasts, bringing perioperative practice and infection prevention together to tackle one of healthcare's most persistent challenges, surgical site infections. Each episode will connect you with frontline staff, perioperative leaders, infection preventionists, and healthcare innovators sharing real-world strategies, stories, and solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, and from surveillance data to safer practice, we're breaking down silos and strengthening the systems that protect surgical patients. Welcome to Silo-Free Surgery.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of a special combined season of the Transmission Control and First Case podcast. Today we're talking with Alpa Patel, all things instructions for use, whether it's surgical instrumentation being used in your OR or the processes that you're watching as an infection preventionist. Today we get to learn how those processes are validated and how they apply to SSI prevention. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsors.
Brought to you from the studios of Healthcare HQ, let's get into it. This is Transmission Control.
Hello and welcome back to another special season of the combined First Case and Transmission Control podcast. My name is Garrett Hollembeak, Editor-in-Chief of Transmission Control, and today we have a topic that you may be wondering, why are we talking about this when we're talking about surgical site infection reduction? And to answer that question is our guest today, Alpa Patel. Alpa, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Garrett.
Well, thank you for coming on to the podcast and talking about really a significant piece of the SSI reduction picture, and that's adherence to manufacturer's instructions for use. So for anybody in the audience that doesn't know you, Alpa, tell us a little bit about your background and your work.
Sure. Thank you for bringing me into this podcast. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart. My name is Alpa Patel. I work at Nelson Labs. I've been part of the reprocessing industry for the last 24 years. I've worked with manufacturers to design instructions for use, validate the instructions for uses that are needed for the devices to get through 510K submissions from FDA, so you guys can use it in the hospitals. So that is my background. I also write a lot of standards that help design these processes and validation for instructions for use. So I'm also involved in that part of the industry as well.
That's excellent. And for those listening, I get to sit on one of the committees the AMI committees that Alpa is also on. And every time there's a meeting, there's great commentary, there's great insight and information. We always want to put a plug. If you're not involved in AMI committees and IFUs are a headache for you, go and get involved. Go and learn about the process. Cannot advocate more where if IFUs are a struggle, whether you're on the IP side or in the OR or in sterile processing or any other end user, involvement in those committees can be very helpful in understanding the process. So to kick off this conversation on instructions for use, tell us what are some of the challenges of current instructions for use that are used in the OR for surgery?
So often when we talk about challenges in the current state, what comes to my mind is IFUs vary widely in format, structure, length, and clarity. You see a big booklet and you have to go through all the pages to find the right portion that belongs to the SPD department that's actually doing the processing, right? Many IFUs are also written broadly to fit multiple markets and settings in different countries, right? Not all size fits all. So they have to vary their structure in format, in writing, and even in layout of how they're placed in the instructions for use. They're also very hard to follow in real clinical workflows. That's the biggest issue.
That's so true. And I know our IPs listening have probably seen a trend, and our peri-op friends as well, where, you know, the IFU really doesn't start when it gets to decontam. There's so many steps in there that apply to point of use treatment and care that are done in the OR. So it's not just an SPD responsibility anymore. It's needing to know those IFUs in and out in the OR setting as well. One question I have for you is why is the format, the structure so important, and what kind of language are we seeing in IFUs that's almost counterproductive or counterintuitive to the workflow?
So some of the formats in the IFU, what we're seeing right now, if you think about it, automated cleaning, we're still seeing wording instead of a table format, right? We all know that the table format's easy to read, easy to program, easy to see that the parameters are clearly written. Like we have for sterilization, packaging. How are they packaged? They say use a certain packaging, but how are we packaging them? How are we putting them together? They're leaving interpretation to the other side to figure out how to package them, if they're written this way, how to program them, are they even written properly? And also the language, if you can, try to use minimum of this. We recommend that you flush this many times. Is it a recommendation or is it a step process, right? Mm-hmm. These are all validated so you know what works. So why are we writing these kind of languages in the instructions for you? So we're leaving interpretation to the people that are actually performing these processing steps.
That's a great point, because you do read sometimes, and it does feel like it's open to interpretation, where, you know, somebody may say, hey, it's only recommended in the IFU that I do this. So what are some of the downstream clinical effects of vagueness in the IFU?
When you leave interpretation for us to interpret what we're interpreting, what happens is we're now going to fill it up with what I think, not what somebody else thinks, or what the IFU is, what the intention of the IFU is, right? It was validated for a certain point. So I am not filling those gaps in. And then you're cleaning it a different way each time because you've left all these interpretations. If you can, well, I can't, I'm too busy. I have to skip the step. So I'm just going to skip it, right?
Right.
Use a minimum of 20 mils. Well, I don't have a syringe for 20 mils. So, you know, I'm just going to do this. So things like that, we're leaving a lot of interpretation where things may just get overlooked or bypassed.
Yeah, that's a great point. And sometimes you even see I've seen it in IFUs before where it'll say, do A, B, and C according to your hospital policy, or to refer to your hospital's policy for things. And it really gives like a cyclical kind of error where we say, all right, our policy says to look at the IFU says to look at the policy, and what's really the source of authority when we have that issue?
So we're currently in the middle of this right now in standards on AAMI ST79, right? We have a task group that we're working with, and we're talking about every step refer to the IFU, refer to the manufacturer's recommended IFU, refer to the manufacturer's recommended IFU. So all the steps are IFU. So then now we have to make instructions for use that is usable and readable to the SPD or CSDD departments to understand the flow and the easiness of making it. We make it too cumbersome. And then we have standards that also write, do it this way. And then we also have organizations write, do it this way. And then test labs like us, we write, do it this way. So what are they supposed to follow? Right? So we've already created that cloud of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's such a challenge when you're working through it. And then even consulting multiple IFUs. So you may have this daisy chain of IFUs where you have the device or the instrument. You've got the equipment, whether that's a washer, an ultrasonic cleaner. Then you've got the sterilizer, and then you have the packaging. And so how have you seen a good way to, I don't know if unify is the right word, but to really navigate those IFUs in a way where a consistent process is followed for a wide range of equipment and instrumentation?
So for us in our lab, what we've seen is, because these are also people, young people that are reprocessing these, right? These are analysts that are doing it. And when we wrote it exactly the way the IFU was written, too much, we got so many questions back. So I could just imagine what the healthcare facility is going through. So then we started breaking them in little pieces. And instead of paragraph, they're bullet points.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And it would be manual cleaning. Here are the bullet points for it. Automated cleaning. Here's a table that you're going to program in the washer disinfector. So we just wrote it in a way how it would be processed in the healthcare facility. And usually for processing, they do have one set flow, right, in processing, no matter everywhere in the world you go. So if we can align with that processing step where we're giving them instructions and breaking them in pieces, so and putting enough spaces between the bullet points where it's not also totally back to back.
Overwhelming.
Yes,
yeah, we've just got this laundry list of 150 steps.
Correct. And that has helped tremendously.
I imagine that makes it easier to integrate with technology too, because I imagine if you're using your tracking system to put like pointers of following an IFU or everybody follows this step or doesn't follow this step, it's much easier to put 3 bullet points to, do A, B, and C, as opposed to like this paragraph and then the technician looking up in decontam to the monitor and trying to follow all these steps. Whereas if it's bulleted, it makes it more human factors and user friendly.
That is absolutely correct. And we learned that over time ourselves.
Now I want to kind of open up that black box of validation and how IFUs are developed and tested. Because I think we all know they go through a testing process, but I don't know that we always know the ins and outs of how that process goes, or how, when somebody asks, well, how did they get to writing this in an IFU? How does that process work?
The main difference between validation and what's written in the IFU is we're validating what's actually written in the IFU. What we take from the IFU is we challenge the processing steps, right? So we have point of use cleaning, validations. We don't use point of use cleaning because we are cautioning into error where, what if they forgot? What if they were in a hurry? They have to change the room in 20 minutes. So they just throw it in the bucket and put it out with no absorbent towels or even a foam, and it's outside. So we just cut out the point of use cleaning. We challenge the IFUs using worst case considerations, right? So we're looking at reduced soak times, reduced flushing volumes, detergent dosage, soiling the devices more than what it would see during clinical use. So I'm adding more blood, I'm adding more tissue to just simulate those worst case conditions. And then real world hospital practice is essential to understand whether the IFU is feasible or not. So we as a test lab have taken the step to go to our local hospitals and watch them process. And just watching them, we see a lot of gaps of what we didn't do back a few years ago that we have implemented now. So we're mimicking what's happening. Of course, it's not to the extent that the hospital is going through, but some things are simulated in that condition. And I think that is a very important thing that needs to be considered when you're doing validations for reusable medical devices, and where IFU is part of that.
Right, where you have to take in the real clinical environment, where you're backed up on case carts from here to the elevator. What are some of the things that you saw, extra steps or steps not being completed when you observed the real world conditions?
When we went to healthcare to see, of course, they didn't have access to IFUs. So that was the first.
Okay.
That was the first
So
thing.
step one, get access.
Yes, that was the first thing that hit us first. I mean, they did have processes for different devices. If it's lumens, you use this method. If you have drills, you use this method. So they did have it, but it was it was manual cleaning, ultrasonic cleaning, washer disinfector, and sterilization. So whether you had ultrasonic cleaning or not, that's the entire process, right? They're taking safety approach here to add additional steps to accommodate what is not probably in the IFU. So we saw that this is the entire process. We're definitely not doing ultrasonic cleaning in most of them.
Sure.
Right?
That's a huge area of opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. So we started bringing that on. Anything that's orthopedic, dental, ultrasonic cleaning is now a must. You cannot just say we don't need it. Right? And so we do add that into the processing. Another thing was it was fast. They were going very, very fast. They're cleaning instruments extremely fast than what the validations. We have 6 to clean for half the day, right? So we're taking our time. We're taking our due diligence to brush every single thing we can brush.
Right.
So visual inspection is almost always passing for us because we have that time.
Yeah.
In healthcare facility, we don't have that time. They're going really fast in the processing. So those were the 2 things that we saw that is a discrepant definitely between validations and real life.
Yeah, and that makes sense when you think about the sheer volume of instruments. So you're talking six trays or 6 instruments that you guys work
only
on?
Devices, 6 instruments.
Yeah. So that's when we think about volume, I imagine every technician, if they only had 6 instruments to do every day, then they would come out perfect every single time, I would hope. But then we hit the real world. So I'm curious, when going through the validation process, if you find that under worst case conditions, there's a failure, and definitely correct my language if I'm not describing this correctly, but if you go through the IFU and you find that it doesn't cut muster, it doesn't get us to the 6 log reduction after going through everything, what's the next step? Do you send that back to the manufacturer, or how does that work?
What happens is now we look at, because we are already over challenging the product, minimizing the contact time, right? Because we're challenging the processing, so we're adding more steps that are not real life. What we do is often we would say, okay, now we will have to test it to real conditions. So say if it was a 45-minute soak, we're doing a 40-minute soak. And now we'll be to 45 minutes. Are we over challenging the sites? Are we inoculating way too much with this microbes for disinfection? If you say, because you just said 6 log reduction, because we will we will challenge the sites that are there. So there is a mitigation risk strategy that we go through in the test lab to see, okay, what are we doing? Are we over challenging? The first question is, are we over challenging the process?
Right.
And then that helps us decide, do we cut down the challenges? And if we do cut down the challenges, and even if they fail, it goes back to the manufacturer, be like, okay, I don't think this is going to work.
Right. So that makes sense. So you start with worst case scenario, you move, and then you validate the process, and then you move it back towards feasibility given the established parameters.
Yes. Keeping in mind that we still do worst case, but not to the not to the extreme at this point. We go in the middle.
And that's a term that I think piques a lot of ears, is worst case scenario. Is there an objectively defined, what does worst case scenario look like?
No, nothing is out there that specifies what is worst case. They give you, like I just mentioned, reduced soak times, reduced flushing times, detergent dosage, the amount of soiling that you do on the product. So you're just over compensating on the soiling and undercompensating in the processing. That's it.
See.
But where you cut that, it doesn't specify anywhere. We just know from the instructions what we need to put down. Anything that affects the processing are the steps that we will minimize.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And you see from time to time these kind of horror stories come up in the news where an instrument was sitting getting sprayed periodically for a 2-week period. Well, that's a condition that I don't know we would even know to test for, because instrument damage is another one. Where is the IFU designed to accommodate cleaning when there's damage or broken pieces to the instrument?
So simulated use cycles are required. In 2015, FDA guidance document on validation of reusable medical devices, they did come out and said simulated cycles have to be performed to make the devices into used condition on how it would be used in healthcare facilities before it's challenged to a validation. Before that did not occur. So we would just get instruments from the manufacturer, which are nice and shiny, and we would do validations on them. But now we would have to do simulated use cycle. So as of 2015, that has happened, where there's 6 cycles of soiling, cleaning, and sterilization. Soiling, cleaning, and sterilization. And you do that 6 times. And the 7th time is when we do the cleaning validation. So we've challenged it for reusability. But if you're asking me if they're dented or broken or something, it's usually not. We don't see that after 6 cycles.
Right. Yeah. Or somebody used and it never happens in the OR where somebody uses the instrument incorrectly and there's damage or a chip or something.
Yes.
But I think that's an important call out that, if something's broken, your IFU is not designed to clean a broken, damaged instrument that genuinely needs to be repaired.
That's correct. And from my understanding, for all the IFUs that I've seen in the last 24 years, there is a precaution page in there that if you see this, or if you see this broken, or if you see this loose, or if you see discoloration in this area, return it back to the OEM, right? And do not use or discard. So manufacturers do give some guidance in that area to ensure that it doesn't get reprocessed. But all this goes in training. Who are you training, right? Are you training the right people? Are you training the people that are actually processing your devices? Or are you training their managers, and the managers are training? So it's like a telephone when we were kids, right? You say something and it goes down and they get the total different message.
Yep, that's true.
So I think it's important to bring these things to the SPD teams and talk to them directly, and not through other management systems or infection preventionists. They can be part of it, but the training should be directly with them. And if you think about it, human factors. All manufacturers have to do human factors for engineering to make sure that the device works, the device is safe, right? It's not going to malfunction during procedure. Things like that. We are now going into the realm of, are we also encountering human factors for instructions for use? Have we even done that? Are we enforcing that you have to provide us this data as well?
On the human factors engineering. And I love that, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. Is and it's such a great point. We do human factors engineering in all of these other aspects, and it's only now become part of the conversation to do these with instructions for use as well. Yes.
And we're seeing, and HG75 that just came out after so many years, they have a huge portion on the engineering portion, but they have added a little bit on instructions for use. But I feel like we're taking the right steps to get there, and the awareness is there for sure that IFUs are not in the same, they should be in the same category as an outbreak, basically, right? We have to take care of these. Otherwise, we're continually going to see patient safety here compromised.
Yeah, and that's a huge assumption that I think is worth challenging. Is, hey, if we throw it in the sterilizer, if it looks clean when it gets through decontam, it's absolutely going to be safe for the patient when it comes out. And that's where we connect this IFU conversation to surgical site infections, because there's so many other factors that are going into that, and just putting into the sterilizer does not solve or mitigate bad cleaning or bad point of use treatment or insufficient inspection.
And what a lot of people don't realize is there's protein that you can't see, right? There are organic and inorganic markers. Even metals that are in the water that you can't see, they can harbor organisms. And if they have harbored organisms and protected it, no sterilization is going to kill it.
Right.
Right?
I love that you said that.
So you're leaving that behind for the next patient.
Right. And maybe assuming that, hey, our process is going great. I didn't see any visible bioburden. So we must be great. There must be no SSIs that resulted for non-compliance to the IFU.
Right.
I think that also plays a role when we think about retained bioburden and how that's being reported. And the OR, I feel, does a great job. Hey, we had a tray come up that had some soil or bioburden. Is that error always getting tied back to, let's double check this piece of the IFU compliance picture?
I think, in healthcare facilities, I think it goes to the infection prevention. Mm-hmm. With us, we are validating the whole process, right? So, but we're not validating. Now, one thing that you probably don't know is we don't validate a full process. We validate parts of it, right? So manual cleaning, automated cleaning, they're all done separately. Disinfection is done separately and sterilization is done separately. We never validate the entire process as a whole. So we wouldn't know.
That's a great call out. So for your IP and your OR kind of partnership, your IPSPD OR trifecta should be in there watching the full process go from one step to another. And honestly, probably with the IFU in hand to kind of double check in their own facility that each step is being followed appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. And water systems are very important in that aspect too, right?
That's a great point. So we are seeing a trend where with the release of ST108, now it's been out a couple of years, where you're starting to see in the IFU reprocess with water that meets ST108 standards.
Yes.
How are sites approaching that? How are they tackling it? Is it a stopping point for IFU compliance?
No, I think that they are enforcing it's a standard. With ST108 coming out, it has challenged a lot of hospitals. As we know, we have 7,000 hospitals in the United States. To have them compliant in 2 years, it came out in 2023, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take time. We test worst case, Garrett. So what we do is we do have ST108 waters, but we also challenge with hard water. Right? To make sure that, say, if a certain state doesn't have the water requirements in the hospital, then it can still be processed and can still be safe. So for validation, we do take those precautions as well.
That, I imagine to the audience hearing that's such a sigh of relief to say, hey, these are being tested under real world conditions, because my water here in Ohio, maybe it's not great. We've got super hard water. But to know that the process is being challenged with that in mind, I think is a kind of a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Now, where we look at kind of the future state, rounding out this episode, the future state of IFUs, if you could wave a magic wand and see something different or see a change or a trend for the future, what would you hope to see?
First thing is human factors testing. We have to include that as part of the engineering process. That we have seen so much good come out of it. And just to see the SPD department come to our lab and do those testing that even we didn't think, they are showing us that we're also being in this field for 24 years. I'm still missing things that they are saying, yeah, this is not how it's going to work. You will have to change it this way, or can you word it a certain way? So it is, they have the knowledge that we don't, right? We're scientists here, and manufacturers and engineers that are designing these with the scientists that are testing them, and they're just reprocessing them, but we're not seeing their eyes. We're not understanding what they're reading, and we're writing them according to how we think should be written. So we also have to acknowledge that. I think that acknowledgement is huge, and we need to walk towards that. Manufacturers need to observe frontline staff, people. They need to be there. They need to see how the product is being not just used, because they do go do that. They do go see that. That is part of the engineering stuff. But how is it being processed? It's used up on the third floor, but what's happening in the basement?
Right.
Right?
So I think that's a great point, and I'm curious if it's the more common case or the more rare case where manufacturers are observing frontline conditions.
From my understanding, it is some manufacturers do a great job understanding that, and some manufacturers assume what is happening in the front line, right? But I think it is a stool with three-legged stool, right? You need to understand how your device is being processed. You need to understand how it's being used, and you need to understand how it's being tested. And you have to put all three of them together to make a product that's safe and efficient for our patients.
What a great point. This process is so important, and you can't imagine we have such great developed technologies and processes where if you go back 50, 100 years, the number of surgical site infections that could have been prevented by well-developed, well-written, and IFUs that we adhere to, it's astounding to think about. So as we close this out, what does one go and do that your OR staff member or your IP listening to this can go to help support IFU compliance?
I think they need to bring it up to the infection preventionists, right? Who else are they going to go to? They're going to go there and specify that we need to see some data behind all these processes. I know we can't do all the IFUs. I know we have certain processes that we have outlined. Have we validated those processes? Right? And if we haven't, can we validate the process so I feel good about what I'm doing and bringing a safe product to the patients?
I love that. And great point and great go and do for the audience listening. Alpa, we want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight and really giving us a deep dive into how IFU processes work and the safety constraints and also kind of the future state of them. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you.
Well, what a great conversation with Alpa Patel. I know whether you're working in the OR or down in SPD or in infection prevention, IFUs are one of those topics that can be a real headache. It's super helpful to learn how the validation process works and very exciting to know that human factors engineering piece is becoming more of a trend, becoming more common, and really is something that we're taking into consideration when we're going from a soiled instrument to something that's going to keep the next patient safe and SSI free. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. And remember, infection stops where information starts.
Thanks for tuning in to the Transmission Control Podcast, where infection stops because information starts. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and share this episode with your team. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep transmission under control.